Hello and welcome to a live Deprogram with Keri Smith. I am your host, Keri. Welcome back. If you're a regular viewer, I apologize for missing Friday. I've since been back to Colorado again since the last time I saw you guys, and we went to get our van. We're back in Texas. Very excited to be home and be back on a regular schedule. I'm also really excited about our guest today. If you are a new viewer of Deprogrammed. We often do interviews on Thursdays, but today I'm really blessed. I have a guest who I haven't spoken to in a few years. He was supposed to be with us last week. We had a scheduling mishap, and he's here today. His name is Kenny Shu. You may recognize him. He's been doing a lot of media appearances lately and really kicking ass. So I'm very grateful that he gave his time to be here with us today. And he's here to talk with us about one of the recent historic Supreme Court decisions that we've been covering. Please welcome Kenny. Hello.
Hi, Keri. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be back in the state of Texas, and I'm happy to talk with you. It's been a few years since I've spoken with you.
Yeah, it really has. Last time we talked about everything, so I'm excited to
Yeah.
do it again.
Yeah, you have been busy. So you are the author, and we've put this below in the description. You guys can find links. You're the author of Inconvenient Minority. We talked about that last time we spoke. And you've got a new book coming out on August 1st called School of Woke. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that book first before we talk about the Supreme Court?
Sure. I mean, I'd love to. And really building on my research from my last book, An Inconvenient Minority, which is about Asian American culture of excellence and how
Mhm.
that makes them a minority that's inconvenient to the left. School of Woke really builds upon, I think, one of the intellectual left's big failures in over the past 40 years, which is education, and especially education for Black kids.
Mm.
Um, the statistics show that Black kids are way, way, way behind, even though they've significantly improved financially and in social status in this country. Education is the one place where Black kids continue to struggle. And School of Woke is really about why we as a country and liberal policies really have turned schools from being educational centers of minority excellence into places of indoctrination, social activism, queering, um, and hurtful narratives that discourage these kids from succeeding and its lasting consequences of society. So I'm really excited to get on tour with this new book, School of Woke, which comes out August 1st.
So there is a website. I'll put it up here now, and you guys can find it below. It's schoolofwoke.com if you want to pre-order the book. As I said, it's out August 1st. You're making me think of something that recently, with all the coverage around the Supreme Court's affirmative action decision, I went back and watched some old footage of Thomas Sowell. And I watched a clip of him when he was being questioned by Joe Biden in the 90s in Congress. And
Hmm.
and one of the things he was saying sort of, I think anyway, you reminded me of it. He was saying that affirmative action doesn't actually help anyone, not even the groups it privileges, and that it's not helping the Black community. Does that ring true to you? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Right, especially when you define affirmative action as lowering of standards for the Black community, which is what Harvard did. Harvard's affirmative action program lowered standards for Black Americans. A Black American could score 200 plus points lower on the SAT, still have a higher chance of admission as an Asian person. So it really is the lowering of standards. And what I think Sowell was talking about is that that doesn't help Black kids in the end. It may help a selection of elite Blacks in the short term, but that is the um, that is the extent of
Mhm.
how of the Black people that it really helps in the short term. Most Black Americans will not benefit from this, and in fact, it will engender a greater culture of victimhood. And when affirmative action and lowering of standards for equity is applied into the K-12 school system, it becomes worse. In School of Woke, I talk about when you lower discipline standards, for example. For example, President Obama made a guidance in 2011 that said schools had to discipline Black kids at a racially equitable rate, proportionate to their presence in the school. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem is Black kids have a higher than normal rate of altercation with other people. So you're basically asking teachers and administrators to lower discipline standards for them, fewer suspensions and expulsions, even when they are a bereavement to their class. And so that's not going to help the Black kids who want to study because they're being distracted, and that's not going to help teachers, it's not going to help the principals, and it's not going to help the school.
And it's not going to help the kids who have the disciplinary problems because
Right,
there's no
right.
consequence for behavior. That's similar to lowering the academic standards. I think is that it's that oh gosh, who was the guy who called it the soft bigotry of low expectations? Was it W called it that?
Yeah, it
I
was W.
well, didn't wasn't a big fan of the guy, but I think he was right because
Yeah,
uh
actually, maybe it was someone else, but anyway,
yeah.
yeah.
But anyway, I think he was right. Is over time, as you mentioned, in the short term, it might benefit a few people, but in the long term, it's not helping the community you say you're trying to help or the racial group you're trying to help. One of the things Thomas Sowell was talking about was when you lower the standards, you actually have higher numbers of people who do not graduate, who are dropping out when they would be successful if you put them in a school where they were better matched, where they are the top. Um, and that it's not a benefit in the way that people are selling it. So that was kind of mind opening to me. um can you talk a little bit about what you've been working on the past couple years and how it relates to the Supreme Court decision?
I run an organization called Color Us United, colorusunited.org, where you can go and be a member if you stand for a race blind society, right? So we as a country have been drifting towards that ideal, except recently it's been slipping because people want to pin every disparity, every issue on race. People want to use race to harass people and group people. People want to use race to influence decision making. None of this is true because race is a very poor indicator of a person's character, social status, or ability.
Mhm.
And so we're trying to break the race narrative. And what we've done is we've taken on several big institutions that have had divisive race based policies, usually in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion, such as UNC Medical School, which was prioritizing hiring Black doctors versus hiring the most competent doctor. We launched petition campaigns, started it in North Carolina, got over 5,000 signatures from patients, and we got them to drop that policy and to drop the DEI framework that sort of created the justification for that policy. So we also did the same thing with the Salvation Army when in late 2021 they were basically asking their members to apologize and lament racism, even though their own members are not racist. They're the least racist people ever. They're going into Black and brown neighborhoods and supplying them with food and shelter and essential clothing. We were able to speak directly to the donors through targeted social media and get them to rescind that framework. So our impact is measured in um, persuading leaders and organizations to drop divisive race-based standards, but we need, of course, the people to support us. And if you believe in the ideals of a race-blind America, of course, you should sign up at colorusunited.org.
Can I ask you, do you come into when you're out talking about your organization, you're talking about race blind America, do you bump up against this whole right left tribalism? And is it different talking to someone who calls themselves a part of the left than it is talking to someone who's a part of, who considers himself part of the right? Does that is that ever a hindrance? Because I would imagine sometimes I try and imagine my old self, social justice people watching this show, and I try and remember they do sometimes watch the show. I hear from them. Sometimes they start off watching it to hate me. And
Mhm.
then over time, some of those people have stopped hating me and started listening to a few things. And so anyway, I try to imagine them watching it, and I think a lot of them believe that they are race blind. So do you find that to be a hindrance at all, or do you talk to people in the same way? If you're talking to someone on the left, do you talk to them differently or the same as someone on the right? Or how does that impact your kind of the conversations you do around this issue?
Well, there are people who are skeptical of color blindness on the left and the right. Um, I talk to both people. Some people on the right, for example, believe that your race means that you have certain genetics, which means that you have a certain level of abnormality or intelligence or anything like that. And I'm not denying that that could be the case, but it's not going to influence the way that I treat you when I meet you, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm going to try to look at you as an individual, and if you talk in a way that makes me feel that you aren't very smart, then I will know that you're not very smart. But I'm not going to assume just because you're black that you're not
Right.
very smart. Um, but then there are people on the left, though, that they have an aversion to this term color blindness because they think it means that I'm ignoring racism.
Mhm.
And to those people who are on this video chat or who are going to listen to this, I asked you this question. How is me deciding not to assume anything about your story before speaking to you based on your skin color racist? How is that me ignoring racism? If I see racism, I will call it out. But I'm not going to assume that you live under racist circumstances just because you have a certain color. It's actually dangerous for me to do that because it means that I'm coming at you from a position of patronization.
Mhm.
And that doesn't help you. That doesn't help us become friends. That doesn't help us get together. And that doesn't help us heal from this climate that wants to separate us on the basis of race. So there are good-hearted left people out there that are
Yes.
skeptical of the term color blindness, and I've actually talked with people in my community who are good-hearted UNC Chapel Hill grads. They were talked they were taught in their social studies classes that color blindness is bad. It means you're ignoring racism. You need to be race conscious. But really, what they mean is you need to lower your standards for Black people. That's something I'm unwilling to do. And if that makes me the enemy, then so be it. I'm
Mhm.
unwilling to lower my standards for minorities.
Mhm. Do you mind if I show a clip? You've been, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm so grateful to have you with us today because you've been so busy talking about these issues in the media, and you're doing a great job. I find those places sometimes like going into the lion's den where I watch people do it and they're sort of walking in, um, maybe sometimes unprepared for what's gonna be thrown at them, and you handle it so well, like, you were very prepared, and do you mind if I show a clip of you on CNN?
Of course.
Okay. Now some of you guys, you may have already seen this one. I don't think I shared this one yet on our show, though, so this'll be new. The interesting thing about this was one of your appearances on CNN where the host shared the clip, which I don't know why. I think she thought she bested you or something.
Well, why,
But
why don't you see it for
yeah,
yourself?
yeah. Okay.
Kenny, can I ask you though? I mean, colleges obviously they care about grades and SAT scores, but they also are filling universities of people, human beings who have other factors that they bring to the table. Why is it not okay for them to consider those things?
I'm saying if you're going to consider those things, you should consider them without respect to race.
Sure,
So as you know, a lot of Asian
so
Americans,
I
right?
think that that's
You
exactly
should
right.
you
But
should
socioeconomic status doesn't. If you take race out of it, let's call it socioeconomic status, where whether or not they grew up wealthy or poor, is that not something that colleges might have an interest in considering?
the reason why you shouldn't consider that is because you should consider the success of an applicant. Because of affirmative action, Black Americans graduate from law school at the bottom 25% of their classes, largely speaking. And we don't want that. We want Black students to succeed. We want every student to succeed, low income students to succeed. you have to put them in scenarios, in places where they're likely to succeed. And lowering your standard to admit somebody of a socioeconomic status or race would not help them do that. In fact, it would harm their graduation rate and excellence.
Well, as the case also points out, the standard isn't necessarily lowered because students are all admitted. The question is whether race can be an added consideration, a tipping point
No,
in
the
some of these
standard is
cases.
lowered. The standard is lowered.
Kenny,
The standard is lowered as the student merit admissions data shows. An Asian has to score 273 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of admission as a Black person. So the standard is lowered for Black Americans.
Kenny Shu, thank you for your perspective. We really appreciate you joining us today.
That was amazing. Your face was amazing also when she said, well, the standard's not lowered because we let them in. It was kind of a circular argument, right? Like,
yeah, right. I don't know why. Yeah, I just, yeah, I couldn't stay silent when she said, yeah, well, the standard isn't necessarily lowered. I was like, what are you talking about? What do you think this case was about? Like, what do you think we won an entire case against Harvard about? They didn't use race as a tipping point. It was like degrees, hundreds of SAT points, degrees of lowering standards for Black kids. So,
can you summarize in your words, what did we've talked, as I mentioned, we've talked about on this channel, but what did the Supreme Court say, and what are some potential loopholes? Because I know there might be a potential loophole with their decision.
I mean, the Supreme Court said you can't use race in admissions. That's what they said. And they gave a variety of reasons why that was the case, but their decision was you can't use race in admissions. You can't use it directly. You can't use it indirectly. You can't try to discriminate against applicants through the personal essay or those kinds of things. You can't try to discriminate against applicants through the interview process. They said equal protection says discrimination is wrong. That's what they said. Before, you were allowed to use race in the admissions process. You were allowed to look at it. You were allowed to, ask for it. I don't know if the Supreme Court says you can't ask for it anymore, but you certainly can't use it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that there are some people that are trying to find loopholes. I know Harvard's trying to find loopholes, but I actually think that the Supreme Court offers fewer loopholes than people think. For example, Harvard says you can use race as an individual consideration in someone's essay. No, you can't. The Supreme Court says, they even gave an example of like a person being graded on an essay. And they said, you cannot take into account a person's victimhood story just by the fact that they mention it. If race is a part of that person's life, sure, you can evaluate, you can look at that, you can be sympathetic to that, but you can't make judgments. You can't, that can't then get you to say, well, man, this person wrote an essay about her racial victimhood. That means that I'm going to admit this person over somebody who didn't write an essay about their racial victimhood. The Supreme Court explicitly forbid that.
That's what I was
Harvard
asking
can't
about.
get away with this stuff. Yeah. And
Yeah,
if it does, they will be subject to further lawsuits.
That's what I was asking about, because I saw Harvard saying something along those lines, and also Biden. Here's a headline, for example, where he says he urges a new path forward that factors in adversity after affirmative action ruling. And so what I hear you saying is that, look, you can write about adversity in your personal essay, and maybe race is a part of that, but your essay is judged based on the quality of the piece, not on what was your specific adversity. Was it race? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Biden is, of course, trying to find ways to get universities to flout the Supreme Court's decision by trying to take into account the level of adversity or socioeconomic affirmative action. the Supreme Court didn't rule on socioeconomic affirmative action. So if Harvard wanted to implement socioeconomic affirmative action, they potentially could. I would not be in support of it.
Mhm.
But I don't think Harvard didn't want race-based affirmative action because they wanted more poor students. Harvard wanted race-based affirmative action because they wanted more black students. So I don't know to what extent they're really going to do that.
This reminds me of you and I may have spoken about this a couple years ago. It was did we talk about in New York in the public schools how they were there was a magnet school that was discriminating against it ended up being mostly Asian students, and they were trying to defend it on the basis of socioeconomic status. But when you looked at those Asian students who were being discriminated against, most of them were on school lunches. They qualified for school lunches. They were from poor immigrant families. So to try and say, oh, we're doing it on the basis of socioeconomic status, when a lot of the kids that you're disadvantaging through racial discrimination, they're not in these upper, class levels that you're these,
Mhm.
the supposed financial elite that you're talking about.
Mhm.
Did we talk about that? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think we talked about that.
Mm.
The specific example I was giving was from my book, An Inconvenient Minority, where
Right.
the majority of the kids in applying to New York City's specialized high schools who are Asian were poor. I
Mm.
think 53% of them were on free and reduced
Wow.
lunch,
Wow. Okay.
something like that. That's not the case with Harvard. The majority of kids who get into
Right.
Harvard are rich, regardless of race. So I'm not, but at least in New York City, yeah, like you really are discriminating against poor kids at that point when you say we don't want as mmany Asians to get in, because Stuyvesant High School, their top tier high school was like 73% Asian at that point, and for some reason, Bill de Blasio and Eric Adams saw that as a problem. For some reason.
For some reason. Yeah. Um, can I ask you about one of the common comebacks I get on social media? Maybe other people in the chat get this as well when they try to talk about these issues. Some people come back at me and say, "What about legacy admissions to places like Harvard?" What do you say
No,
about that?
I don't support legacy admissions. I mean, you had a 5 times higher chance of getting in if you were legacy at Harvard. If you're a child of a donor, like, that donates 10 million and above, you could get into a dean's list, which gives you like a 40 to 45% chance of admission. Of course, if you were the daughter of Xi Jinping or President Obama, forget that. That's like 100%. So I don't support nepotism. I want a merit-based society. That's what Colorists
Yes.
United, my organization, has always stood for. I want it to be about merit. That's a concept increasingly fading from liberal elite America, and that's why I wanted to use Harvard as my subject of discussion, because Harvard represents in many ways the mindset of elite America. And when elite America stops caring about merit, starts caring about other things like race, legacy, privilege, access to politicians, then they may boost their immediate advantage in the in the cartelish elitism game, but they're really harming not only themselves but society in the long run by not admitting and training the most meritorious and best and brightest.
Mhm. Can I switch gears and ask you, can you give some tips for people for talking about these subjects? Because as I said, you do it so well. And a lot of times I get the kind of questions I get from the people who watch Deprogrammed are, how can I talk about these issues with my college age daughter who's sort of leaning towards the woke belief system? Or, how can I talk about this with a friend or family member who is primed to be upset and coming from this this place of thinking I'm a racist if I'm against affirmative action? What are some tips that you have?
Well, I would ask your college age daughter, do you believe that the most meritorious should get in? I would always try to concentrate the discussion on merit, because if you concentrate the discussion on merit, then it's going to reframe their point of view. Because right now they're like, oh, not enough black students are getting in, not enough poor students are getting in. They're focusing on things that are not about merit. Doesn't matter if you're black, doesn't matter if you're poor. whether you have a certain merit. And I'm not talking merit in God's eyes. I'm talking like academic ability and everything like that. So get them to concede that merit is important. And they may say something like, it's all rigged anyway, you know, Harvard's admissions is just a game. And that's when you have the opportunity to say, oh, really? Then why do so many people want to get in to Harvard so bad?
Yeah.
If it's just a game, if it's just a rigged game. She's like, oh, well, because it has a reputation for what? For excellence, for like the best people. That's why. And you want the best people, you want the people admitted fairly, right? You want them admitted based on actual contributions to the world. So once you do that, then you can talk about the facts. You can talk about, hey, you're not a racist, right? No, I'm not a racist. Well, if it just so happens that a lot of Asians happen to be very good academic abilities and Harvard's an academic school, then shouldn't they get in?
Mm-hmm.
She's like, well, yeah, there you go. You know, you basically overturned in her mind the reason for affirmative action because you're concentrating it on what are the foundations, which is merit.
Yeah. What work is left to be done in this area? Because I know the Supreme Court decision only dealt with college admissions, and I believe aren't military academies excluded from the decision? What other work is left to be done?
They made an exception in a footnote. I don't support affirmative action in military academies either. In fact, I did an interview with CNN, my first interview with CNN. They specifically asked me about military academies and whether I supported affirmative action military academies. I said no, because the military already has a better way to include communities. They never lower the bar for anybody if you're black or poor. But if you are disadvantaged and you don't meet the bar, there are training programs that you can go to get you to that bar. So I wish people would emulate the military in that sense, because we don't want to lower the bar for anybody, but we want to get people to reach that bar. And that's so far worked in the military. It's done very well for itself.
What else is left for, like, with your organization and the kind of issues that you're working on? Where are you guys also focusing on primary schools, on elementary schools, places like that? Or are you still focused primarily at the college level?
We are going to pick our next target soon. I want to know that I want to say that our focus is going to be on changing the race narrative, specifically changing the narrative that America is a racist country. So for me, teaching our kids is really important. Teaching our kids that your character is so much more important than your race. I think that that's the grounding passion for me. That has always been the grounding passion for me. As an American raised in this country, you know, I've met so many great people of all different colors. My godparents are white. It does not matter to me that they're white or black or whatever. It matters to me how the kind of love that they show me. And that's what this country should be about. So I'm going to tether my focus in the organization, whatever our next target is, to really go after the heart of that, the core of treating people according to the content of their character, not the color of their skin.
I love it. I think you're doing incredible work. If you had one guess about what made you the man that you are, like how you came to, I don't know, not be wooed by some of the stuff on the left, like the woke stuff that I was. People here know my story. What would you say it is about you, about your story, your experience? Maybe it's family life. I don't know. What led you to be so grounded and to have your eyes so open?
2 words: faith and truth. I have a strong faith, and in God's community, nobody is looked at by their race. God's currency is not race. He made us all different looking, but ultimately, you know, if you point your eyes to Jesus, then you're part of the same community of believers, regardless of the color of your skin. So why can't we model that in human life? And then truth, because when the Black Lives Matter movement came about, like many people, I was sympathetic. But then I actually studied the facts and I realized, well, blacks aren't actually killed at disproportionate rates by police. Oh, and also, like, you know, what about, where is this systemic racism? Where is it in the law? It's in these policies, you say, but, you know, why did so many black leaders support these policies when they were also brought in, like the drug policies, for example? These are bad policies. You can say they're bad policies without calling them racist or the people behind it racist. Why are we going about trying to divide people? So it was a hard sort of nosed focused on the truth. I was a math major in college, so for me, it's not like there's no your truth and my truth. Okay, there's just the truth, and I was looking for it, and I did not find it in critical race theory. I found the opposite of it, and I realized that this was influencing our media, education, journalism, and I had to speak out against it. So that's what led to my advocacy: faith and truth. I think if you stick by those two things, especially faith in the highest thing that you could possibly strive for, which is God, then you're going to be able to weather and buffet the storm of whatever the trend is.
I agree. I feel like I'm kind of boring today because I'm agreeing with what you're saying. I can't pick it apart. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about, it's funny you mentioned truth right after faith, because I've been thinking a lot about what God is when talking about God with people who are not believers, but maybe they have a strong foundation in truth. And to me, looking at that looks to me like they are maybe open to the idea of God, because God is truth. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about that, and I've had some very interesting and fruitful conversations with atheists who have a strong commitment to truth, and I'm like, see, that's why you're making so much sense.
Yeah.
So well, Kenny, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm very grateful that you could stop by and talk about some of these issues, and very excited for your book and your organization, Colors United. Here, I'm going to put this back up on the screen. If people want to get a copy of the book, where's the best way to get it? Is it through the website?
I think schoolofwoke.com is a great place to get it, but Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound they're all good websites out there. I mean, it's widely available for pre-order, but don't wait, because honestly, and this is true, in the next 10 years, critical race theory and queer theory are going to be just the issues that parents are just going to have to learn about. It's going to be the same thing like body image was in the 90s and 2000s. You know, it's
Yes.
just essential learning when your kid is in school. So schoolofwoke.com.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Take care. Keep doing what you're doing. Very, just very grateful to have had you on the show today.
Thanks, Keri.
Cool. Thank you, Kenny.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys check this out. Schoolofwoke.com. Also, if you're not following Kenny, you should follow him. If you are on Twitter, you should follow him. He's at Kenny M. Xu. That's Kenny M. XU. And you can follow along with some of the appearances he's been doing where he's just kicking ass. I would say, like that CNN one of his talents is maybe because he's, he mentioned being a math major. He's so calm and he's so rational. And I love it. And even when they're trying to do one of the gotchas that I see people fall into in these media appearances, sometimes he's just very calm and rational. It's like, but these are the facts. It's like, it's so cool. So go check him out. Thanks for hanging out today. Let's see. We're only 40 minutes in. Do you guys want to talk about, are there any other topics on your mind, or should we wrap this one up? I just got back from getting our van, and I feel like we have been on the road for almost a month. So I'm a little scattered. I do have some other things that have been on my mind. If you guys are up for it, you tell me what you want to do. Oh yeah, Jules said he did a great chat with Peter Boghossian recently. Yes. So if you haven't seen it, check out Peter Boghossian's channel. I was on that channel as well, I think right after Kenny. But go check out his interview with Peter. Peter's doing a lot of really interesting stuff lately. Peter's trying to find a way to scale deprogramming, like how to wake people up from the woke insanity on a large scale. Somebody says, I assume van life went well. Well, Davina, it broke down and we had to leave it there for a week. And then we had to make our way back there because we had to come back to Texas for some shows and then go back up. And they didn't fix it there. It actually, here's something about emission standards. It would have cost 3 or 4 times as much money to have the van repaired in Colorado as it would in Texas. We found that out based on the problem. So because of the emission standards that they do, the California emission standards there. And so anyway, they did a temporary fix for us and we were able to get it home and actually drive it and get it home. And now we're going to have it fixed here for much cheaper. So that's what's been going on with us. Yeah, limping the van home. Is Keri cutting the stream early, shortchanging us? No. No, I just I know Kenny's busy and wanted to let him go by 12:45. Here's something we can talk about. This is what's on my news. On my mind. It's nothing in the news. It's nothing like huge. It's more culture and faith, I guess, kind of stuff and music. So there's this new Johnny Cash biography out. I know there are a lot of them, but there's this new one that came out earlier this year. My husband's been reading it, and during our whole road trip, he's been telling me all about, all these other details about Johnny Cash's life that I wasn't familiar with. Some of them, the broad strokes. He struggled with addiction and pills and womanizing and alcohol and all this stuff. But I didn't know some of the details about that struggle and just how long, because he cleaned up for a while with the birth of his son. He was sober for, I think, like 7 years. Then he got back into pills again and struggled with all the same stuff again. And so it's like this story of redemption and then falling off again into just self-hatred and depravity, and then redemption again. And so yes, Cash was a legend. And so that was on my mind today, that, about Johnny Cash and about that book. And I read this article. This was in Newsweek from February. And I think it may have coincided with that book coming out. Here, can you guys see this? It's called The Johnny Cash America Didn't Know. And there's so much in the book about his walk with God and about faith and about redemption and all of his struggles. And so anyway, this article, The Johnny Cash America Didn't Know, it says, the man with 3 names had 2 loves. We all know one of them thanks to the 2005 biopic Walk the Line. Her name was June Carter. But he had another love, a higher love, one never mentioned by name in the entire movie, one with similar initials, Jesus Christ. There are some hints and intimations about Cash's second love. In an early scene in the film, a young Cash, played by Joaquin Phoenix, auditions for the man he hopes will make him the next Elvis Presley, Sam Phillips, the Sun Records impresario. Cash plays a gospel song, but Phillips isn't moved. Quote, "No one listens to gospel anymore," Phillips tells him. "Go home and sin, and then come back with a song I can sell." End quote. It turns out Cash never stopped playing gospel music. Almost a quarter of the songs he wrote were about his faith or the Bible, and many others were influenced by his Christian worldview. It wasn't just gospel music that moved Cash, it was the gospel itself, the Bible. Later in his life, Cash would record the entire King James Version of the New Testament. He also performed at many Billy Graham revivals, and he made a movie about the life of Jesus. This is in the book, by the way. Anthony was telling me all about this. They went to Israel. They did a documentary. It flopped, apparently. But he was for a while, very focused on just doing gospel music, just talking about how God changed his life, doing the documentary, things like that. Then he fell off the wagon again, went back to the flesh, right, for a while before cleaning up again. Okay, but listen to this. I like this part. Cash would also go on to write about sin, and from a decidedly Christian perspective. Quote, Cash's strength as a Christian writer was his compassion born from experience, wrote Steve Turner in his book A Man Called Cash. He wrote of sin not as it affected other people, but as something with which he had become intimately acquainted. Yes. Unlike his peers during the early era of rock and roll, most of whom were selling sin and licentiousness, Cash's best music wrestled with both. Indeed, the struggle between the flesh and spirit, between things of this earth and of heaven, animated almost all of his music. It's what drew audiences to him generation after generation, these struggles of the human heart, sin and redemption, good and evil, selfishness and love, and the struggles of living by a standard set not by man, but by God, all were driving forces in Cash's life and work. And that just really hit me, especially this part talking about what his music was selling. And it was saying, most of his musical peers, were selling sin and licentiousness. And meanwhile, his music was about the struggle of the human heart and what, Alexander Solzhenitsyn talks about, the line dividing good and evil runs down the heart of every man. That's what he struggled with in his whole life, and that's what he put in his music. And so all of this was on my mind when I opened up Twitter this morning and was looking at some of the news, and I saw this article from my friend Libby Emmons at the Post Millennial. Oh, here we go. A warning if you have little ones in the room. This is an article about a recent music fest this past Friday called the Mad Cool Fest, and Sam Smith's satanic sexual performance on stage in front of an all ages audience in Spain. She says soon they'll just do live sex shows, which I think she's right. I think that's where this is headed. If you want to read the article, you can. There's video footage also on her timeline. It's just absolutely disgusting, where he's walking around and he, first of all, super overweight, genderqueer Sam Smith walking around in fishnets. He looks hideous in this some kind of women's undergarment, and then there's simulated sex with this guy who's like from behind, and it's just all of this just whole. I think Frank McCormick called it a gay minstrel show, like all of the worst stereotypes about gay people that they're acting out on stage in front of kids, in front of anyone. And so I was looking at this. I was looking at Sam Smith and just this hideous monster that he's become. And I didn't realize he had put out a song with Madonna that's called Vulgar. And so I went and looked at those lyrics, and it's terrible. There's nothing there. It's absolute vacuous cringe nonsense. There's no meaning. There's nothing of redemption. And so because I had the Johnny Cash story in my mind and then looking at Sam Smith, I was just thinking about what they offer the world, what they're selling the world with their music. Again, Johnny Cash being a person who struggled with sin and with, um, you know, his whole life was sort of an arc towards redemption and struggling with the flesh versus the soul, like all of those issues, and trying to take off the old self and put on the new self, and being really hungry for meaning and value and purpose and things that matter at the end of your life, things that mean something. And then you've got Sam Smith and Madonna, which to me, this is just the exact opposite. You can look at this as just the exact opposite archetype. This is the flesh. This is no interest in the soul, no interest in taking off the old self, putting on the new. This is about rolling around like a pig in the old self. This is about hedonism, nihilism, nothingness, just not fighting your demons like Johnny Cash, but letting your demons own you, like becoming a slave to them. And it's completely boring. This is all the world has to offer. He's like a toddler rolling around in his own filth. That's what I see when I see this. And that's what so many of the music icons today, like him and Madonna, are selling young people is be a pig. Be a pig and roll in your own poop. It's great. That's all life has to offer. And I don't know. That's what was on my mind this morning. So since we're not ending it, I figured I'd just talk about that. Sometimes it's hard for me to like tease out exactly what it is I want to say. And so you're getting just these raw thoughts that I'm having, like looking at that article and having Johnny Cash's story in my head. Yes, exactly. Blardful. He's as happy as a pig in, you know the word. That's him. Lindsay, Sam Smith used to be tremendously talented. How the mighty have fallen, right? Just pissing it all away. I wonder if he's ever going to have that redemption arc in his life. I kind of don't think he is. If I were to make a prediction, I don't think Madonna is either. I think they're both sick, yes. And I think they've chosen, just let the demons have me. Anyway, I'm just rambling here. What is the book that he's reading? Oh, here, let me pull it up for you. There's a lot of biographies. This is the one that my husband's reading here. I'll put it on the screen. It's by Robert Hilburn. Johnny Cash, The Life. And yeah, he's been just like, as we were doing the drive, when it was my turn to drive, he would be reading. I can't read in the car, but he does. And he would just be telling me about, oh my goodness. Okay, now he's doing this. Okay, now he's falling off the wagon again. Oh no. You're like going on this roller coaster of like, no. Now he's at the very end. I'm like, you got to redeem yourself again. You got this much of the book left, Johnny. So, CJ, I just got here. Did I miss Kenny? Yeah, so Kenny was on for the first half, and you can go back from the beginning. He was great, and we're just hanging out now. Rib, your skin looks really good, Keri. Thank you. A lady of my age likes to hear a compliment like that. Thanks. Trying to drink a lot more water, so hopefully it's helping. Anyway, that's it. I don't have a lot to talk about today. I just very happy to talk to Kenny, and then had that music and culture stuff on the brain. But thank you guys for hanging out. We are back on our regular schedule. So that means Wednesday night, 8:00 Central, we're going to be doing a live pop culture with Mystery Chris. Thursday, I'm going to have another interview and then Friday, regular time, this time, noon Central, we'll be back. And hope to see you there. And hope you guys have a wonderful week. And you enjoy the month of, what is this? This is the month of freedom. We just got finished with the month of Pride, right? Pride month. Now it's Freedom Month. So I hope you're enjoying it. Oh, look. Oh, by age, you're like, what, in your 20s? Why? Bless your heart. Try 40s, but thank you. Again, at this age, you need compliments, good lighting, a bit of flattery. I appreciate it. Feel like a little old lady. Okay. Anything else? I don't think so. Good thoughts. Never a bad time for that discussion. Yeah, I don't know. These are the kind of things that roll around in my head, Mark. So, at the end of your life, at the end of Sam Smith's life, I just can't imagine spending your life, or at Madonna. Look at Madonna. She had a health scare recently. What will all of that have mattered? Like, what will all of, not that she hasn't been an amazing pop culture icon, she has, and she's done some great music, and I, was a big fan when I was younger. And I'm just saying what she's chosen to do with her life now, I think sort of, I can't imagine not feeling empty at the end of life. And I feel sad for her. In fact, there's a quote of hers that my pastor has mentioned before in a sermon. I think it's very revealing. She said in an interview once, and this is not a direct quote because I don't have it in front of me, but she said something to the effect of every accomplishment she's ever made in her career, in her music career, or in life, makes her feel like someone just for a little while, and then she doesn't feel like anyone anymore, and she has to go do something else. And I thought that was very honest and revealing, and I think that's about the search for something bigger than yourself and so something meaningful. And unfortunately, it seems like in her old age, she's deciding to fill that hole, to fill it up with sex and stupid lyrics and songs with Sam Smith about vulgarity and debauchery and nothingness and, you know, plastic surgery and chasing some dragon of youth and sexual vitality. That's what she's doing. And it's just, there's no meaning in that. You're going to come up at the end of your life, Madonna, if you don't redeem yourself before it's too late. You're going to come up at the end of your life and be like, I wasted it all chasing nonsense. Nothing. Chasing nothing. Trivial things. Anyway. Yeah, she doesn't look human anymore. I know. It is sad. Okay. That's enough rambling. Taking off. Thank you guys for hanging out. See you on Wednesday night with Pop Culture with Mystery Chris. And if you like the show, please consider hitting like and subscribe. Share it with people. If you're a regular viewer, we have multiple ways to become a supporter. If you want to support here at YouTube, you can do that with memberships. We also have a Locals, a Patreon, and a Subscribe Star. And I'll see you guys Wednesday. Take care. Wait, I'm still here. I forgot to tell you, tonight, live at 9:00 Eastern, I'm going to be on Larry Sharp's channel. It's called the Sharp Club here on YouTube. Larry Sharp, he ran for governor of New York on the Libertarian ticket. Super interesting guy, very intelligent. I got to meet him in person. We had already scheduled this interview, and then I got seated next to him at Chrissy Mayer's wedding and got to talk to him in person. It was funny because both of us have too many things we're scheduling and messages and stuff. I didn't even realize we were both saying, "Oh, we should talk to each other soon, do a show together." And then we were looking through messages like, "Oh, we're doing a show in July." So that's coming up tonight. I got to meet him in person, as I said. Super interesting guy. Tonight at 9:00 Eastern, so 8:00 Central, on his channel, Larry Sharp's channel. I'm going to be talking with him and Counterpoints, and I think someone else. We're going to be talking about gun rights, self-defense, and public safety. So if those topics interest you, those mean a lot to me. The Second Amendment is something, even when I was a Wokey, that I think I was an anomaly in that way because all the men in my life were military, and I knew the importance of self-defense. And so it means a lot to me. That's what we're talking about tonight. Tune in on Larry Sharp's channel. Okay, that's it. Okay, we'll take off now. Okay, bye.